The mirror used to be my enemy. Every morning, I would stand before that cold, unforgiving glass and catalog every flaw, every imperfection, every reason why I was not enough. The gap between my front teeth that made me cover my mouth when I laughed. The stubborn weight that clung to my hips and thighs despite my desperate attempts to shrink myself. The angry red bumps of cystic acne that painted my cheeks like a roadmap of shame. But beneath all that self-loathing, there lived a dream. A wild, impossible dream that whispered to me in quiet moments when no one was watching. I dreamed of modeling, of standing confidently before cameras, of creating beauty content that would inspire other women to love themselves. I dreamed of being the face that someone else might look up to, the voice that might say, "You are beautiful," to a girl who needed to hear it. Those dreams felt like fantasies, delicate soap bubbles that would burst the moment I spoke them aloud. I was too shy, too soft-spoken, too everything that was wrong and not enough of what was right. Then Derek walked into my life like a hurricane dressed in charming smiles and sweet words. Derek was everything I thought I wanted. Tall, confident, with the kind of easy charisma that made heads turn when he entered a room. He had this way of looking at me that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I was special. When he told me he loved natural women, my heart soared. Finally, someone who would love me exactly as I was. But love, I learned, can be the most beautiful lie ever told. You do not need makeup, he would say, his hands gently removing the concealer from my fingers. You are so much prettier when you are natural. All those chemicals just hide the real you. At first, it felt like acceptance. Like someone finally seeing past the masks I wore to the person I truly was. But slowly, insidiously, his words began to change shape in my mind. You are prettier when you are quiet, he would whisper during dinner with his friends, his hand finding mine under the table. There is something so elegant about a woman who knows when to listen. I began to speak less, to make myself smaller, to take up less space in conversations in rooms in my own life. The gym would really help you, he said one evening, his eyes traveling down my body with what I thought was love but now recognized as assessment. Not that I am saying you are fat or anything. I love your curves. But you would feel so much better about yourself if you were more toned. I started going to the gym, but not for the right reasons. Not for strength or health or the joy of movement, but because someone I loved had planted seeds of doubt about my worth that grew like weeds in the garden of my self-esteem. The camera that had once been my friend became a stranger. I stopped taking selfies, stopped experimenting with makeup tutorials, stopped dreaming about the skincare campaign audition I had circled in red on my calendar. How could I stand in front of a camera when I could not even stand to look at myself in the mirror? I gave up. Quietly, completely, without even realizing I was doing it. I gave up on the woman I had dreamed of becoming, and settled for the shadow Derek seemed to prefer. For 2 years, I lived in that shadow. I convinced myself that this was love, that his criticism came from a place of caring, that his constant suggestions for improvement meant he saw potential in me. I told myself that real love was about accepting someone who saw your flaws clearly and loved you anyway. But the universe has a way of revealing truth when we are ready to see it. It was a Tuesday afternoon, ordinary in every way except for the moment that changed everything. Derek had left his phone on the couch while he showered, and for the first time in our relationship, it was unlocked. I was not snooping. I was not looking for evidence of betrayal or lies. I simply glanced at the screen when a message notification popped up. But that glance became a stare. And that stare became a descent into a truth so ugly, so calculated, that my entire world tilted on its axis. There, in black and white, in a conversation with his friend Marcus, were the words that would either destroy me or set me free. I keep her insecure so she doesn't realize she could do better. I read it once, twice, 3 times. My brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. This had to be a mistake, a joke, a misunderstanding. But as I scrolled up through their conversation, the picture became sickeningly clear. She was getting too confident last month, started talking about some modeling thing again. Had to remind her about her skin issues. Bro, that is cold but smart. Insecure girls are way more loyal. Exactly. The moment they start feeling good about themselves, they start looking around. Better to keep them focused on their flaws. My chest caved in on itself. The air left my lungs in a rush that left me gasping. Every gentle correction, every loving suggestion, every moment where he had made me feel like I was not quite enough suddenly took on a new, sinister meaning. He had not been loving me despite my flaws. He had been weaponizing my insecurities against me. The rage came first, hot and consuming, burning through my veins like acid. I wanted to scream, to throw his phone against the wall, to storm into that bathroom and confront him with the evidence of his cruelty. But beneath the rage was something deeper, something that felt like awakening. I felt done. Not heartbroken, though my heart was certainly in pieces. Not devastated, though my world had just crumbled. I felt done in the way that a caterpillar must feel when it realizes it is time to stop crawling and start flying. I stood in that living room, holding the phone that contained the blueprint of my psychological imprisonment, and I made a choice that would change everything. I was leaving. But I was not leaving as the broken, insecure woman Derek had tried to create. I was leaving as the woman I had always been underneath his manipulation. The woman with dreams. The woman with potential. The woman who deserved better. I did not pack everything. I did not leave a note. I did not give him the satisfaction of a dramatic confrontation where he could gaslight me into staying, or twist my discovery into my fault. I simply gathered the things that mattered most, took one last look around the apartment that had become my prison, and walked out. The silence of my new freedom was deafening. I had left Derek, but I had not yet left behind the damage he had done. That would take time, intention, and a kind of courage I was not sure I possessed. I found a small studio apartment across town, a space that was entirely mine. No one to tell me how to decorate it, what to put on the walls, or how to arrange the furniture. For the first time in years, I was alone with myself, and the reunion was both terrifying and exhilarating. The first thing I did was buy a new mirror. Not because I was ready to love what I saw in it, but because I was ready to start the work of healing. I hung it in my bedroom, and every morning, I made myself look. Really look. Not for flaws to catalog or imperfections to hide, but to reacquaint myself with the face of a woman who was learning to be free. I started therapy with Dr. Sarah Chun, a woman whose office felt like a sanctuary and whose eyes held no judgment. In that safe space, I began to unpack the damage that Derek had done, but more importantly, I began to understand the strength it had taken to leave. "You saved yourself," Dr. Chin said during one of our sessions. "That takes incredible courage." I did not feel courageous. I felt raw, exposed, like someone had peeled away my skin and left me vulnerable to every harsh wind. But I kept showing up. To therapy, to my new life, to the woman I was becoming. I joined a gym, but this time for different reasons. Not to fix what Derek had convinced me was broken, but to reclaim the power of my body. To feel strong instead of small. To take up space instead of shrinking. The first time I lifted weights, my muscles shook not just from exertion but from the unfamiliar sensation of choosing my own goals. I was not working out to become someone else's version of attractive. I was working out to become my own version of powerful. I sought help for my skin, not because Derek had made me ashamed of it, but because I wanted to feel comfortable in my own face. I found a dermatologist who treated my cystic acne not as a character flaw, but as a medical condition with solutions. Slowly, with professional care and patience, my skin began to heal. I changed my wardrobe piece by piece, choosing clothes not because they hid my body but because they made me feel confident. Colors that made my eyes bright. Cuts that celebrated my curves instead of disguising them. Fabrics that felt good against my skin because I deserved to feel good. But the biggest change was not in my appearance. It was in my voice. I picked up my camera again. My hands shook as I set it up in my living room, positioned the lighting, and pressed record. I had no script, no plan, just a story that needed to be told. My name is. I started, then stopped. Took a breath. Started again. My name is mine again. And this is what happens when you realize that the person who claimed to love you was actually keeping you small. I talked for 20 minutes about Derek, about the discovery that had changed everything, about the journey I was on to reclaim myself. I talked about the gap in my teeth that I was learning to love, about the weight that was mine to carry or change as I chose, about the scars that were healing, and the dreams that were reawakening. I posted the video with hands that trembled and a heart that raced. I expected maybe a few dozen views, a handful of comments from friends. I woke up the next morning to hundreds of thousands of views and comments that made me cry. This is exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you for sharing your story. I am in a similar situation, and this gave me the courage to leave. You are glowing with authenticity. This is what real beauty looks like. The video went viral in the way that only truth can. It was shared across platforms, discussed in comment threads, saved and resaved by women who saw themselves in my story. Suddenly, I had followers. People who wanted to hear what I had to say. Brands that wanted to work with me. But more than that, I had found my voice again. I started posting regularly. Makeup tutorials where I celebrated the art of self-expression instead of hiding flaws. Workout videos that focused on strength and joy instead of punishment and change. Skincare routines that honored healing instead of shame. My following grew, but more importantly, my confidence grew with it. I was not just creating content. I was creating a life that felt authentic and powerful and entirely my own. 6 months after leaving Derek, I received an email that made me sit down hard in my chair. A major beauty brand wanted me to be the face of their new campaign. Not just a sponsored post or a small collaboration, but the actual face of their Power in the Mirror campaign. The campaign that would appear on billboards, in magazines, on television commercials. The campaign that was all about finding your own beauty, defining your own worth, loving yourself from the inside out. I stared at the email for a full 10 minutes before I could believe it was real. The girl who had been too insecure to audition for a local skincare campaign was being offered the chance to represent a national beauty brand. The photo shoot was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Professional makeup artists who enhanced rather than covered. Photographers who captured strength rather than just prettiness. Hairstylists who worked with my natural texture instead of against it. For the first time in my life, I felt beautiful in a way that came from within and radiated outward. The campaign launched on a Monday in October. By Tuesday, my face was on billboards across the city. By Wednesday, I was on the cover of fitness magazines. By Friday, the campaign had gone national. I drove past one of the billboards on my way to the grocery store and had to pull over. There I was, 20 feet tall, smiling with confidence I had fought to reclaim. The tagline beneath my image read, "Beauty is the courage to be yourself." I cried in my car in that grocery store parking lot. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming recognition of how far I had traveled from the woman who used to hide from cameras. That weekend, my phone buzzed with a message that made my stomach drop. "Derek, you look amazing. Proud of you." I stared at those words for a long time. 2 years ago, a message like that would have sent me spinning, would have made me question everything, would have opened a door I had worked so hard to close. But the woman reading that message was not the same woman who had left. This woman knew her worth. This woman had built a life that belonged entirely to her. This woman could see manipulation dressed up as praise from a mile away. I left him unseen. No response. No acknowledgement. No reopening of a door that had been closed for good reason. Just seen. The next day, I received a message from Marcus, Derek's friend from those devastating text messages. We had never been close, but we moved in some of the same social circles. "Hey, I thought you should know something kind of weird. Derek has been acting strange since your campaign launched. He downloaded the billboard image of you and, this is going to sound crazy, but he printed it out and put it on his mirror." I read the message 3 times before the irony hit me so hard I started laughing. He had spent 2 years convincing me I was not beautiful enough, not worthy enough, not enough period. He had systematically destroyed my confidence, kept me small, made me hate the mirror that reflected my face back to me. And now he had my face on his mirror. The face he had convinced me was flawed. The face that had become the symbol of a national beauty campaign. The face that looked back at him every morning, reminding him of what he had lost. The same mirror that had once been my enemy had become his daily reminder of the woman he had tried to break, but had instead helped to create. I thought about responding to Marcus, about asking for more details, about reveling in the justice of it all. But that would have given Derek more space in my mind than he deserved. Instead, I looked at myself in my own mirror. The same face, but transformed by confidence, self-love, and the kind of glow that comes from living authentically. The gap in my teeth that I now considered part of my unique smile. The skin that had healed and cleared and now radiated health. The body that was strong and capable and entirely mine. Derek had made me hate the mirror. He had convinced me that what I saw there was not enough, would never be enough, could only be tolerated by someone willing to overlook my fundamental inadequacy. But in trying to keep me small, he had planted the seeds of my transformation. Every insult had built my resilience. Every manipulation had sharpened my ability to recognize authentic love. Every moment he had made me feel less than had eventually contributed to my understanding of what it meant to feel whole. I had made the mirror love me back not by changing everything about myself, but by refusing to let someone else define my worth. By doing the hard work of healing. By choosing to see beauty where Derek had taught me to see only flaws. The woman in the mirror now was not perfect. She still had the same gap in her teeth, the same curves Derek had criticized, the same face that bore the faint scars of battles with cystic acne. But she was radiant with self-acceptance, powerful with hard-won confidence, beautiful in a way that came from deep within. She was free. Months passed. My career continued to grow. More campaigns, more opportunities, more chances to tell stories about finding strength after darkness. I moved into a beautiful apartment with windows that filled every room with light. I traveled for photo shoots and speaking engagements. I built a community of women supporting women, of voices lifting other voices. I dated, but carefully now, with boundaries firmly in place and red flags clearly mapped. I had learned to recognize love that wanted to shrink me versus love that wanted to help me grow. I had learned the difference between someone who loved me despite my flaws and someone who loved me because of my complexity. Sometimes, when I passed those billboards around the city, I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who was too afraid to audition for a small campaign, too insecure to take selfies, too convinced of her inadequacy to believe she deserved love that did not come with conditions. I felt tender toward that girl. She had survived something designed to break her spirit. She had found the courage to leave when leaving felt impossible. She had done the hard work of rebuilding when rebuilding felt overwhelming. She had saved us both. And Derek? Derek became a footnote in the story of my becoming. A cautionary tale about the kind of love that diminishes rather than enhances. A reminder of how strong I was, how far I had come, how much I was capable of surviving and thriving beyond. He would never touch this glow again. Not because I was angry, but because I had learned what I deserved. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I had built a life so beautiful that there was no room in it for people who wanted to make me smaller. The mirror that once reflected my shame now reflected my triumph. The face that he had convinced me was not enough had become the face that launched a campaign about self-love. The woman he had tried to keep insecure had become everybody's inspiration, including apparently his. But that was his story to live with. Mine was about transformation, about rising, about learning to love the woman in the mirror so completely that no one could ever convince me she was anything less than magnificent. I had taken my power back, one choice at a time, one day at a time, one look in the mirror at a time. And that power? That was mine to keep forever. If this story of transformation and self-discovery resonated with you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us share more empowering stories of women who have overcome adversity, found their strength, and learned to love themselves completely. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, so you never miss a story that might change your life. Remember, you are enough, you are worthy, and you have the power to rewrite your own story. Thank you for being part of this incredible community of strong, beautiful souls.